Champions League is officially back this Thursday. We kick things off with the all-important Champions League draw. The 4 English sides in the competition will have their fate determined. Today, we're going to discuss all the possible outcomes, the dream scenarios, the nightmare scenarios, and ultimately pick who we think is going to win the Champions League this year. Roll that intro. Welcome back to the Lost in Possession podcast. If you're here for the first time, do us a quick favour and hit that subscribe button. It is absolutely free to do so. But without further ado, we are going to crack straight on with the Champions League draw. As I said, it is official this Thursday, 11 a.m, I believe. We will be seeing the fate of all the 4 English clubs. Now, we'll go through the pots to kick things off. So, Reece, we'll come to you. Arsenal are in it. They've not been in it for a while. Do you need a bit of a refresher on how the whole thing works, or?
No, but I'm sure you'd like to enlighten me.
Yes, well, we'll save you the jokes. Yes, Chelsea aren't in it, so I'm a little bit hurt talking about the Champions League, but I'll be a professional. Look, Arsenal obviously back in the competition. We're going to get into it in terms of who they could face and everything, but initial thoughts, how are you feeling about them being back in it?
Yeah, it's great. It's great. First time since, if I'm not mistaken, 2017 they were in it. So it's been a long time. It's been a much needed, return, so to speak. And if Arsenal are to push on like they think they can, they need to be in this competition and not as a one-off. So yeah, it's good. It's exciting to see how they've actually fared, I'd like to think, against some of these teams.
Yeah, and in terms of pots, obviously you're going to be in pot 2. Jamie's sort of sitting there smugly in pot 1. Jamie, obviously Arsenal, we'll get to our predictions right at the end of the podcast, but they pushed you to the title last season. Can Arsenal push you to the Champions League?
Well, it's hard. It's sort of difficult for them to push us, if that makes sense, because we couldn't face them until, the quarterfinals, I think it comes down to. So I wouldn't say it's a real push, and obviously you could be on the complete opposite side of the draw. But I do think Arsenal definitely can get to that stage. They probably should be aiming for that as a minimum. So there definitely could be a scenario of City playing Arsenal, which would be quite an interesting one, considering what happened last year.
Yeah. I mean, you'd love to see that. I mean, well, Arsenal fans would be buzzing, but to even get that
I don't think they would.
Well,
with the record that they've got against us, they wouldn't be buzzing to have that draw, would they? Let's be honest. You'd be buzzing because you could laugh at either one of us. It means one of us can't physically win it. But in terms of, I don't think Arsenal fans could be buzzing to be playing us.
Yeah. Well, I'll make my allegiances clear. I'm wearing my Real Madrid shirt. I want them to win it. I definitely don't want to see an English club winning it this year. Let's talk quickly. Obviously, we'll get into the group stages. Man United back in it. Obviously failed with Europa. What is there any evidence so far to think that they could go one step further and do any damage this year in the Champions League?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's definitely.
I don't think they're in any danger of not getting out of the group, so to speak. It might be a bit of a push, like a struggle. But I think their style of play and the players they've got would probably take a lot of teams to the sword. I think a lot of it could depend on how they actually perform away from home. Might be their big issue.
Yeah. Well, I think if anything, if the start of the season for them in terms of performances is anything to go by, they might be in trouble. But I'm sure they'll be able to turn that around. And then finally, Newcastle. Now, Newcastle, this maybe they do need a refresh on the rules because this has been a long time coming. What an opportunity for them. We talk about obviously the progression with the new ownership. This is their chance, in my opinion, to make a huge statement. Do we give them any chance
to win it?
To actually, to get far to potentially win it.
Look, I think they're going to be in pot 4. That makes it incredibly difficult getting out of the group stage because you're going to get probably 2 big teams in it. You can get a bit lucky. Like we said, we're going to discuss probably the best and worst case scenarios for each club. But teams won't want Newcastle in pot 4 because St James's Park is going to be buzzing. It's going to be bouncing because they've not had it for so long. I think it's going to be brilliant, like the atmosphere wise. Everyone in Newcastle is going to want a ticket. It's going to be something where I think Newcastle do want the big sides. Like they've already been singing about wanting Real Madrid.
Yeah.
For example, they want it because they want the occasion. Look, it's your first year back. You don't like your first year back in it. You don't have to go and win it. The whole point for Newcastle on the project is getting it again, do fairly well. Like if they get to the quarterfinals, that's probably in my eyes a success for them. So I don't think it matters about winning it. It's about the project long term for Newcastle. They're sort of like when City first sort of joined it. It wasn't about winning it. It's about progression for the whole club and the stature of the size of it. So I think winning it's probably a stretch too far, but it's not a place that anyone's gonna want to play them at.
Yeah. Well, let's get into the pot. So we'll start with the obvious, the sort of pot 1, all the league winners. So in pot 1, we've obviously got the holders, Man City, Sevilla. Sevilla currently in the bottom 3 of La Liga. Just going to throw that in there. Barcelona, Napoli, Bayern Munich, PSG, Benfica, and Feyenoord. So some of this might be fairly obvious, but for you boys, well, obviously City can't draw pot 1, but I guess Reece, who do you absolutely not want out of pot 1?
Oh. I think Arsenal have the potential to give most of those teams a bit of a run for their money. I would factor in maybe places going away from home is probably not very nice. I think obviously it has to be Bayern Munich. I mean, whenever we seem to play Bayern Munich, it ends into a bit of a massacre, to be honest. So I'd rather avoid Bayern Munich, even though I don't think they're as good as what they were.
And plus Harry Kane's there, so that's something else. And Harry Kane scores against Arsenal when he was at Spurs, so then that could be a devastating factor.
I'd say they're the worst team by far. I think Barcelona in Europe, I think they're a little bit dodgy. We don't have to worry about Man City, thankfully. Sevilla have a good European pedigree, but again, not what they were. PSG have been a bit clicky. I probably want to play them away from home. And yeah, I think Benfica and Feyenoord are pretty decent sides, but they should be teams you should look to beat. But Bayern Munich is probably the one I would fear the most.
Yeah, I mean, Feyenoord, yes, obviously they won the league, been, certainly improved the last few years, but you really would fancy them as the toughest team in your group. Every day of the week you'd be taking that. And again, with Benfica, no disrespect to Benfica, but we've seen they're a selling club, and although yes, they won the Portuguese league, like every time they get a good player, they sell them, and that's not that's a good thing. We've make a lot of money. We've seen that, but they're never really going to compete, and that's the problem. You never, if Benfica get past the quarters, you would genuinely be shocked. So I think, to be honest, you take either one of those. And Sevilla, as I just said, it's just weird. It's just, we talk about it. We've said it before. Like that European pedigree, it's just something you can't always put your finger on. And Sevilla just weirdly have had it year after year after year. But
they've had it in Europa. You've also got to remember that.
Yeah.
So like it's because, well, even though City have played them this year and they took us to penalty shootout, and they were well in that game and they had chances to go 2-0 up against us. So it's not a team I'd completely write off like one-off games. For example, like going to their place could be quite difficult, but at home you should fancy yourself as Arsenal and United, who can both get them, and Newcastle. They're the ones that you should be aiming, thinking get Sevilla. You've got the decent side of that pot. Really, I'd see it that way.
I'd say they're more Feyenoord, or probably the best case scenario there. I mean, I think if anything, we should be grateful we're in pot two because I wouldn't fancy chances against most of those teams in there. Pot two is probably actually stronger.
Well, we'll move straight on because we'll touch on for Jamie now who City could face in pot two. So you've got Real Madrid. I mean that alone is just ridiculous. Man United, Inter Milan, Borussia Dortmund, Atletico Madrid, RB Leipzig, Porto, and of course Arsenal. So Jamie, same question to you. Who do you absolutely not want?
To be honest, like you don't want it's Real Madrid. Like the answer is Real Madrid. Out of the rest of them, they're not as sort of frightening as them. I think Inter, Dortmund, Atletico, Leipzig, and Porto are all teams that City should fancy themselves against. Should be fancying getting any of them. We should be topping the group. Not saying we are definitely going to, but we should be. So it's not really one that I'd be worried about. Real Madrid, sort of, you saw it last year. We can absolutely batter them, and this year you've also got to remember Courtois is out. They've lost Benzema. Obviously their team's adding on another year. I think they've just had like Vinicius Junior. He's got an injury now. It's a few players, and I think they're sort of big injuries. There's a centre back. I can't remember which one it is. He's got a big injury. So Real Madrid. Who's that? Sorry,
Militao.
Yeah. So it's not like to be fair, at the moment it doesn't really matter, but it might benefit getting Real Madrid in the group stage because their players are out at that point. Whereas you could get them in the next round of the knockout if you finish first and second kind of scenario. But they're still the out team you don't want in that group.
And here's the debate, I guess. Newcastle fans might feel differently, as we just said, but with being Man City, as you said, you'd back yourself against basically any team. And with some of the options in pot 3 and 4, there are some fairly weak teams in there. So would you, a question to you both, but obviously you want to, you go to the games, you want to see your team play against the top teams in the world. Would you want a tougher draw to be like, I want to see my team play X? Because in the group stage it's low risk because it doesn't matter.
No, it's not that.
No, you want your team to have the easiest games to get through because you've also got to remember City we're trying to win the league. Arsenal are trying to win the league. United are trying to win the league. There's no doubt about them three trying to win the league. Newcastle, there's no pressure on them to go and try and win the league. You've got to remember, if you've got to play Real Madrid, you've got to play your full strength side midweek. Then on Saturday or Sunday, you could have Liverpool away, Chelsea away, all these teams. You don't want to be. You want to rest some players. So absolutely not. You want the easiest draw. You get through. You want to see every other group stage being big team. Who's going to get knocked out? You want to see disgusting draws for everyone else but yourself. Really, it's full on selfish, and that's the way it should be. I think for everyone. Newcastle, because it's their first time in it, I think they'll want one big team, if that makes sense. Like they'll want, they'll probably want like Feyenoord, then Real Madrid, so that way they can come second in the group.
Yeah, I mean,
they've still had that big game.
Yeah, they're in a situation where they've got no choice. They are probably going to get a good team, aren't they?
Yeah, they are most likely. Yeah, but that's sort of the way I'd see it from their point of view. You want to see it because you're back in the Champions League. You want a big team because that's what you want. You want an away trip to the Bernabeu or Camp Nou, places like that. That's what you want. That's why you're in the competition, because you're going to be playing teams like this. But I feel like for City, Arsenal, and United, you want the easiest draw to get through and then focus on the league.
Yeah, no, absolutely valid. Well, we'll cover pot three quickly because there's a couple of gems now, I think, as well. So currently confirmed for pot 3, we've got Shakhtar Donetsk, Red Bull Salzburg, AC Milan, you've got Lazio, you've got Red Star Belgrade, and then obviously you've got to bear in mind there is qualifiers still going on. So I'll reel off some of the teams that could be in pot 3 or 4. So you've got Celtic in there as well, Real Sociedad, and then a couple of the other winners of the qualifiers will make it into pot 3. So before we cover the worst case scenarios for you both and the best case, any teams there that could be in pot 3 and the ones confirmed, anyone that's standing out to you guys as a threat?
Celtic's not a nice place to go to. It's good in terms of travelling for an English team, but Celtic's not a nice place to go to where it's going to be a great atmosphere, but it's going to be hostile, really. And then I think sort of another team, I don't know if they're going to be in pot 3 or pot 4, but it's Galatasaray. They're playing in the qualifiers. Get one of them. You're like Galatasaray, you're going to have players who don't even want to probably take corners because they're going to get pelted with everything. Really, it's just the way it will be over there. They'll create the most hostile event in the group stage. So things like that will play on players' minds. So that's where I think you'd want to just avoid, even if you fancy your team to beat them comfortably.
Yeah, agreed. Reece, any for you that's standing out at the minute?
Yeah, I think pot 3, even though a lot of people probably look down on that, there are actually some good teams in there. AC Milan are obviously the standout name. They've won the competition like 7 times. Probably the favourites for Serie A this season. Lazio are a bit of an enigma, I think. Wouldn't want to go to the Stadio Olimpico. But overall, they're a pretty poor side from what I can see so far this season. Red Star are obviously infamous for their hostile atmosphere, but again, they shouldn't really be a threat to people. Salzburg and Shakhtar are quite interesting teams because you don't know what ones you're going to get. They can upset you on the day and score goals, but then they can absolutely get thrashed away from home. So I'd say definitely Milan are probably the biggest one there, then Lazio. But I don't think anybody should knock Shakhtar Donetsk or Salzburg, to be honest.
Yeah, I think both of those teams, to be honest, Shakhtar, even the sort of the so-called weaker ones, we've seen in the past they are capable of turning it on and as a one-off game again, causing an upset. But yeah, for me, the team, if I had to pick, would be AC Milan. Even not at their best last season, they were in a semi-final. And again, we talk European pedigree all the time. To be able to get to a semi-final, although they were disappointing in that game, not at their best, is impressive. So I definitely wouldn't want to be drawn against them, in my opinion, other than, maybe Newcastle if they want to go to the San Siro. Finally, so we'll just touch on pot 4. Again, I'm going to reel off the few teams that are confirmed. Still qualifiers ongoing. We've got Newcastle, as we've said. Union Berlin put in a good shift but put in a great shift last season. And Lens as well in the French league. So they're the ones already confirmed. Obviously, again, there's a few. I'll read off the names that we just heard that could be in both pot 3 or pot 4. Celtic and Real Sociedad. So again, you wouldn't, in my opinion, there's no super easy path. Obviously, we are filming this before the qualifiers are fully finished. But as a weakest team in the group, I do think Union Berlin and Lens aren't easy games. We've seen last season, both of those can cause problems for the big teams, and that's Bayern, that's PSG. Who would you guys... I mean, obviously, again, I know there's only 3 at the minute down official. Who would you want to avoid?
Yeah,
It's tough, to be honest.
Yeah, I think Union Berlin have heart, didn't they? They've got this. They're going to give 110%. I think that's something that a lot of teams aren't going to enjoy when they go away to Berlin, especially in that stadium. I think I prefer Lens or Lens, and I prefer them. I think because I think they've sold players and not really recruited well. They've got some good players though. I'll have to give them that. And I think again, away from home, then probably not the team you're going to feel comfortable with.
Yeah, it's difficult to sort of obviously talk about who you want in pot 4, who you don't want. You probably don't want Union Berlin out of the pot 4, but just looking sort of at the qualifiers, I don't know if they'd actually go into pot 4, but PSV playing Rangers, that's probably the toughest. I'd say probably the toughest two in the qualifiers for that. So they're probably the ones you'd want to actually avoid, but you got to see if they get through first of all. But yeah, it's difficult to sort of go, yes, I want to avoid them, because to be honest, the pot 4, you're in pot 4 for a reason. You've not been doing that well in the competition before, so I don't see many doing that great out of it. Newcastle are the standout of it, who have the sort of difference in the club building up with the money that they've now got, whereas the other teams won't be able to compete financially like you can with Newcastle and the Premier League.
Yeah, just saying, having a look at the qualifying teams. I know we've mentioned a couple. I do still think, again, to reinforce the point, there is a couple of gems in there. You know, even Antwerp in the Belgian league have been impressive in the last couple of years. You've got, as you touched on, PSV Rangers. You've got, you know, Copenhagen. They're always in the competition. Yes, they're never the favourites, and you know, they're usually in pot 4, but again, they're a team with experience that can cause problems. You've got, you know, young boys are always in it. Maccabi, who were in it last year, I believe, and Braga as well in the Portuguese league. Again, pretty decent side. So maybe there's no such thing as an easy path, but let's push it out to you guys now. So obviously, City, we've said, are in pot A, pot 1. Arsenal are in pot 2. Let's pick out some of your dream routes to start. We'll start nice. Jamie, who would you say for City is the dream path at the moment? And feel free to chuck in a qualified team if you want as well.
Yeah, fair enough. So I was thinking pot 2 would be Porto. I think last time we played them, it was a bit of a hostile atmosphere. Was a lot of kicking going on. It's the only bad scenario, but otherwise they're the weakest team in that, in my opinion. Pot 3, I'm not sure who would go into pot 3, so I'm just going to go for the teams that are already in there, and you'd have to look at Red Star Belgrade. Sorry. They're the ones that you want to. They're the ones you want to get. And then in the final one, I'm looking at the teams who are possibly winning their games. You probably want Copenhagen's. We played them last year. It's not far to go to. This is the sort of thing you can get distance travelled. This one, not far to go to. Look, they're an okay side, and we didn't beat them away last year. We did draw 0-0, missing a penalty, but we'll be happy to have them again. Let's be honest, it's not anything like that. So yes, I'd say they're the 3 I'd take for the nicest scenario for City.
All right. And Reece, do you agree with that, or do you disagree? I guess you can wave the flag for both Arsenal and Man United, their dream routes. You got the pressure of both clubs.
I think for a City perspective, it's probably good for him. I think, Arsenal's case could be similar to United's. I think best case scenario, you want Feyenoord from pot 1. Again, there's no disrespect there, but they've got to a pretty slow start, still sold some good players. And I think in terms of the other 2 teams, if it all works out in qualifying, you want to face Rangers. Let's be honest, PSV are better than Rangers. There's no qualms about that. And I would say that Antwerp as well. Again, yes, won the league and cup double last season, but still think they're a little bit shaky. I think, so I think they're the best case scenarios. I try and justify it that way, just on paper. But I think as well, you want to factor into other things. You don't want to be going to, Poland or is it South Jet or Salzburg, for example, in the middle of winter? Do you Copenhagen, for example? That's like, you don't want to be going there in the winter away from home at all. So I think that's probably the best case scenario Arsenal and United can probably hope for there. Feyenoord, Rangers, and Antwerp for me.
All right. Well, Newcastle isn't represented here, so I'll give one for Newcastle fans, and of course, feel free to disagree with me in the comments. So I'm going to go for the holiday destinations. So they're in it for the first time. The Geordies want some away days, so I'm going to go Pot number 1, Sevilla. Probably not one of the best teams, but a nice away day. Nice sunny Spain. Pot 2, they've got a song about it. They want Real Madrid.
Well, that don't work, Jordan. You got to think about.
Shit! All right, sorry. Let me rewind. We don't want Sevilla anymore.
This is it. Chelsea not in it. He doesn't understand the rules.
I'm rattled. All right, let's have an. I was about to say Barcelona.
Maybe edit
right.
this out, by the way.
Benfica, I think. Benfica would be a good one to have in the pot 1.
Yeah, it's a nice day out to Portugal. Benfica, you could definitely beat. Let's go with Benfica. All right. Then we got Real Madrid. Again, they've got a song. They want Real Madrid. And then pot 3, AC Milan. Take the big boys out. Take the European heritage. Nice away day. I think Newcastle fans will be buzzing with that.
Would they not, like just sort of here, because it's Italy again, would you not want Lazio? Like, thinking Lazio would probably be an easier game than Milan. So would you not want that? It's both Italy, so both fairly nice. It's, just sort of...
though. It sounds better if we beat AC Milan. Oh, we beat the ex-winners, I don't know.
It's kind of you're going holiday destinations, but I was going for a bit of an easier draw for them.
Yeah, to be fair, I've picked out a possible nightmare one as well. All right, let's do the nightmare draws. So we'll do it for City. I don't think there's a nightmare situation when you're in pot 1 as such, but what's a nightmare for you, Jamie, do you reckon?
Well, I think the worst case scenario is, like I said, Real Madrid in pot 2. Obviously, we can't play United and Arsenal. I think they're probably the second and third best teams in that group pot. Real Madrid. Then, to be fair, this is just going with Jordan's best case scenario for Newcastle. It'd be AC Milan. It's probably the toughest game there. And then the last one, I think pot 4 would be Galatasaray if they fall into that category. I think I think they're not going to be great, but it's just going to be so hostile going away there. It's not going to be nice. The players can kick it around for a while, but getting a corner, like I said, you're going to be pelted with stuff. It's just going to be constant ringing of booze and other stuff. So yeah, that's my worst case scenario, I'd say.
Reese, same for you. Give me a nightmare draw.
Yeah, pretty much Bayern Munich, obviously, because our record against them is appalling. AC Milan has to be the other one. I just don't like that idea. I think we're very similar in terms of quality, or in terms of ability. I'd probably say we're quite similar there, so I don't want to play them. And yeah, it's got to be Galatasaray if they go through. Especially with our mentality, Galatasaray away is not a good one.
Yeah. And I think for Newcastle, the nightmare is like a PSG and a Bayern. Then you're getting thrown in with Real Madrid. And then suddenly you've got, we'll go AC Milan. I know we've all said it, but if Newcastle, this kind of dream of being in the Champions League, I think could potentially turn into a nightmare where they're like, hold on, we actually could not qualify here. Which I think for Newcastle, with where they're trying to go, what they're trying to build, I think would be a bit of an embarrassment to then not get through the group stage. So I think if you look at that, Bayern, potentially Bayern, Madrid, and Milan for Newcastle, you genuinely struggle to call that group and to give Newcastle a chance of getting through.
I wouldn't say it's I don't know what you said, an embarrassment. I don't see that being the case. Though
their first time back, they're trying to be not one of the big boys.
They want to be in it, but if you got Bayern, Real Madrid, AC Milan, there's no embarrassment to going out to that group, because really if anyone gets Bayern, Real Madrid in their group, let's say Arsenal could get it, Arsenal could be very likely to not get through. United the same.
Yeah.
City would have to. It'd be a bloody tough group if City got both of them. So I don't think it's an embarrassment, but yes, you obviously want to do better. And you've got to remember, sort of speaking from a City experience, we didn't get out of the group stage for the first 2 years. that we got through. The first year we did get the record number of points not to get through, funnily enough. But then the second season we didn't win a game. We had I remember it was the group of death, but it was all the champions. We had 4 champions in one group, but we didn't get out of it. So I'm still not saying it's definitely not embarrassing if they don't get out of it. But if they get the nicer draws where it's the Feyenoords, Porto, sort of them, then they need to be getting out of it. But it depends on who you get in the draw, of course.
Yeah.
And teams that do return to the Champions League for the first time in a while do actually tend to struggle, like Jamie said. I remember Borussia Dortmund under Jurgen Klopp had a nightmare when they returned. They just couldn't get out of it. You know, it's just one of those things. I think, yeah, that's something to be aware of, especially for Arsenal as well. Is do be careful, like, because they're not nice groups.
Yeah, no, that's fair. That's fair. Obviously we will touch on United, but obviously for United it's basically the same death route as Arsenal because they're in the same group and the same conditions apply. Before we wrap up, let's all quickly pick ultimately who we think is going to win it, but also a potential dark horse. So obviously a dark horse being someone who's not, in pot 1 and ideally a lower pot, but anyone who'd, upset the odds by winning it. Jamie, will come to you first.
I'm actually torn between 2 for winning it. First of all, is City. I'm like, we should be favourites. There's no sort of doubt about that. And I think the sort of second one, who's not dark horse, but Bayern should have. I think will have a very good chance. They always get around it, and then they've got Kane scoring the goals, and he's been brought in to carry that front line, and I think he can. And now he's not with the Spurs side, he can definitely bring them to winning the Champions League and score important goals. Dark horses, I've struggled with this. I know it's not quite a low pot, but I think Arsenal can be classed as a dark horse in this. Because apart from Arsenal fans, I don't think anyone has them realistically winning it. Reece will probably disagree and say they've got no chance. But I think they could be the dark horse in this and win it for the first time.
Reece, that'd be unreal. Who would you say?
Well, can only dream, right? I think, yeah, let's be honest, odds on City are the favourites. I think Real Madrid might do it again. I don't know why. I think looking at how they've been in the league, they've been absolutely outstanding. Bellingham is just looking unbelievable. He's taking his game to the next level there. Yes, they've got some injury problems, but this is Real Madrid we're talking about here. The same team that lost, the likes of Sergio Ramos, Varane, all in one window, still went on to win it. So yeah, I think I might put them as favourites. In terms of dark horse, I'd agree. This is where it's quite hard because I would argue that so many teams are at the same level. I'm not overly struck by many of them either. But I do expect better of Atletico Madrid. Do expect better, and I think there will be better. And I think a team that might throw a few punches will be Real Sociedad as well.
Yeah, interesting shout. We've seen some, good performances in Europa before. It'd be good to see. For me, again, there's the two obvious ones: Man City, Real Madrid. I'll go with Real Madrid. Got to back the boys. I'm wearing the shirt as well, so it's got to be done. And again, Bellingham absolutely taking the league by storm. I think he could be, the dynamic, the next level that Real Madrid have. Benzema's gone. Can they go up a level again? Can they rise to the top? I think already he's showing that he can drag them back up to where they belong. For me, I think dark horses. I do think Newcastle. Obviously, I've said they could go out in the group stage, but I think we've got to consider the quality of the team. Doing what they did in the Prem, even coming third and fourth, still puts them above a lot of these teams on here in terms of quality. And they'll also have the sort of buzz, we're here for the first time, not first time, but we have not been here for years. That sort of buzz or momentum, whatever you want to call it. And I think particularly in the group stages, the crowd is going to be phenomenal. The Geordies will be following them away from home. backing them for the first time. So I'd say Newcastle. And of course, they're dark horses because they've not been in it for so long. They're in pot 4. But yeah, I think they could upset the odds. But there you have it. That just about wraps us up for another episode. As always, let us know your thoughts in the comments. Like, comment, and subscribe. You know the drill.